Welcome to New Earth Mystery School. My name is Miriam Husna, and this is the topic of empath medicine. We're going to be talking today about what this concept that we call being an empath, what it is, how some people experience it, and I will be talking about why I used to identify as an empath and why I no longer identify as an empath, and why I have for many years now, and even on my business card, it says this. One of my business cards, I have 3 versions. One of them says retired empath. So I retired. I was like, okay, I retired from this job. And so I've talked about this online kind of playfully for years, and people have always said, how do you retire? Like, how do you do it? And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to break this down in a class of why I retired, how do you retire, and all that kind of stuff. So I have so many things to cover today. But first, what I want to do is I want to ask for those who are with us today live, how many of you, and there's no right or wrong answer, and I'm going to talk about why if you identify as an empath, it's totally fine, it's totally great, and I'll talk about why I personally do not. I think our guest for the second class, Jamie, she still identifies as an empath. How many of you identify as an empath? Let's see, like who in here identifies? Okay, great. Yep, I figured a lot of people would. Some people are saying I retired. Some people are saying I do. Yes, sometimes, yes, I do. You've had that title put on you. Awesome. Ex-empath, kind of, I don't know. I identified up until today. I never have. I don't have a label for myself. I want to retire. Okay, I do, but part of it hasn't resonated. Okay, I love all of this. The term is complex and the situation is such that I would like to retire, please. Okay, beautiful. I love it, I love it, I love it. I see some people saying I prefer the term highly sensitive. That's what I also use. I also use highly sensitive, or I use extrasensory. So we'll get more into that. So I love that I see a lot of different ways of talking about this and identifying. This is a class that is, as much as it is about talking about empathy and labels and concepts, this is also a class about how we identify ourselves. So this is a class about using language in a way that is empowering and that is supportive, and understanding that the way that we use language is going to determine our experience. So I want to give a little bit of context about my story. I want to read the beginning of, I have 2 articles that I wrote back, I would say probably 2014, maybe 2015, I'm not sure. Back when I identified as an empath. When I excuse me, when I came into the term empath, I was very grateful, because what it did is it helps to contextualize what I had been experiencing in my life up until then. So from where I was identifying, being able to name it, being able to say, here's what I am, it's a thing, like it's an actual thing, there's a name for it, and it really allowed me to like step fully into that experience from a place of like just feeling like I don't even know. I feel like something's different. I feel like I'm different. I feel like I'm wrong. I feel like I'm a problem. I feel like I'm the only one, right? So it gave me, I felt like I belonged to something. Whereas before that, I felt sort of like imprisoned in this place of like not knowing, right? So when I came across the term of being an empath, it felt empowering. It felt like this is what it is. I can talk about it now. I can explain it to people. And I was talking about being an empath very early on. Like, even when I was talking about being an empath, I really didn't know a lot of other people that were talking about it. So in a way, I feel like I was like a pioneer in sort of like the realm of like openly talking about being an empath and identifying as an empath and being online and all that kind of stuff. Then there was this like huge wave of like, I'm an empath, I'm an empath, I'm an empath, and all this kind of stuff. And I started to kind of feel like, I don't know, like it just doesn't fit. Like I felt like I outgrew it somehow. And I also felt like I was tired of it. I felt like some of the things that I was seeing about it, about being an empath, didn't resonate with me. Some of the ways that people were using this narrative of being an empath didn't feel empowering for me anymore, and started to just feel like I wanted to shift and to reframe. And so like I remember, and this is how spirit does things sometimes, I like jokingly was like, I retired. I'm retired. Like I'm retiring. I was like, I need a raise and I need a promotion. That's what I said, right? Lo and behold, you know, and I know there's many times you guys have probably heard me talk about, you know, like I just want to get paid to be myself, where I say things that I think are a joke, but they're coming from a very lighthearted place. And then the universe says, okay, here you go. And that's what happened with this. Shortly after I had said, I'm retired as an empath, right? And I no longer want to identify as that. I was actually given very, very clear, specific tools to retire. So I'm going to talk about those today. But first, what I want to read is a little bit from the blog post that I have, where I was talking about myself as being an empath. And you may be able to see that this is like an old version of me talking. Maybe you're able to know me enough now to be like, wow, this sounds totally different. So I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to tell you my story of like kind of like how I kind of came into this way of understanding. So the main feelings that come to surface as I'm describing this would be powerlessness and self-doubt. These were the dominant feelings relative to the concept of being an empath. I felt as if I was sensing or picking up on, I felt as if what I was sensing or picking up on was imposed on me from others, as if I had no choice in the matter. At some point, I realized that others did not experience this overwhelming flood of sensations to their entire body just by standing next to people or being in certain environments. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I would often feel others' emotions more strongly than even they would. I had no clue what was going on. I just knew that others could be in a very busy setting without feeling bombarded with sight, sound, smells, and other types of sensory input. I knew that I would burst out in tears at the slightest things. Why are you being so sensitive? I'd heard this my entire life. It was often framed in a way that was clearly a burden to others that I wanted to so desperately please and feel acceptance from. It's not my problem that you're so sensitive, I would hear. I was commanded from others so often to just stop being so sensitive. What I didn't realize at the time was that I accepted that others knew better than me. I assumed that something was in fact wrong with me. I internalized the belief that I needed to stop being so sensitive. In other words, I needed to stop being myself. In an effort to be accepted, I decided that I would just change. This process of rejecting myself caused me an immense amount of pain throughout my life. I felt often at times that my mere existence was a mistake. I questioned how God could have made such a mistake, so I assumed it had to be something that was wrong with me. Little did I know that not only was I rejecting myself, but I was also disconnecting from non-physical energy that was ever present in my journey as my guides, angels, ancestors, and other spirits. I felt haunted and even cursed by their presence, yet ignorant to the torturous inner circumstances I was creating. I had not gone into these feelings for so long because I had not felt this way in my life for years, but as an empath, we have the ability to conjure any feeling that we choose. So I embody this, choose to embody. So I traveled back through my past in order to be able to share this experience. I decided to experience all that came up to be with it, to be present, and most importantly, to show up for myself in a way that I never had been able to. This time I went through those feelings without the judgment, without the limited perspective, from a more enlightened, witnessing point of view. I ended up retrieving so many fragmented pieces of myself that had been disassociated from the trauma of being too sensitive to cope with the overwhelming experiences of my past. I came back with even stronger extrasensory gifts than when I first decided to embrace this, who I was, which is about 4 years ago. Okay, so that was me writing about myself as an empath, as I was identifying it as the time. And I was basically saying, you know, that throughout my whole life, I had been having this experience where if I would be around people, I would feel their feelings or their emotions, right? I would feel that, I would feel their pain. I would feel their sadness. I would feel it physically in my body, right? Can you all relate to this? Right. Okay. So my way of identifying that was by calling myself being an empath. Now, what I learned after, as I started to parse everything apart, is that there are some things that are associated with being highly sensitive, and there are some things that are associated with being an empath, and we'll talk about that more. But what I want to share about how I came into any of this and understanding any of this, and can you all hear me okay? And my throat's a little, I'm gonna need to stay hydrated. Okay, perfect. So when my son was about 2 years old, he's 12 now. When my son was about 2 years old, he had not started talking. And I went to school, when I was in college, I went to school to be a teacher. And specifically, I wanted to be a special ed teacher. I wanted to work with autistic children. So I majored in education and specialized in special ed and early childhood development. So that was my plan. I was going to do. I was going to be a teacher, and I was going to work with autistic children. And so I knew a lot about special needs children. I had worked with them for a while, and I had a lot of experience with different ways that children could be labeled, and the idea that children have a myriad of different personality traits and things like that. But then there's also this idea of being on the spectrum, which is autism and many other things fall on that spectrum. But I specifically felt, for whatever reason, very attuned to autistic children. So I thought that he might be autistic because he had this way about him. He was extremely sensitive. His temperament was very sensitive since he was born. I think when my son was born, probably for the first 3 months of his life, he cried probably nonstop. And he was so sensitive to sound. If a motorcycle would drive by, if a fire truck would drive by, if there were lights, he was sensitive to, temperature, like cold baby wipes, and again, me being a first-time mother, I didn't necessarily think anything of that. But when he was 2 years old and he hadn't started talking, and he also had this way where he would look at it, he would go into like an object. Let's say he was like looking at, let's say these beads, and he would just like go into them and be so focused and like sit there and be sitting there for so long in his own world. Like he was always in his own world. And then he also wasn't talking. So when he was 2 years old, I said, I'm going to take him to get tested. And I remember everyone, like, I don't say everyone, but many people were like, why are you taking him to get tested? There's nothing wrong with him like this. And I was like, I don't think anything's wrong with him. And I don't have those kind of stigmas where I think there's something wrong with autistic children or children on the spectrum. I think they're actually very special. So to the idea of getting him tested wasn't because I thought that there was like something wrong with him at all. It was the opposite. I was like, I want to make sure that he has his needs met, and I want to empower him. And I want to know what exactly is happening. So I took him to this center where he could see a specialist, and they did a series of tests where they test everything. And a lot of it was like play therapy and things like that, where they would give him objects to manipulate and to just see his cognitive range. They tested him auditorily. Could he hear certain things? They tested him verbally. So they interviewed him, and there were just many different tests that they were able to do. And so they came back with the results that he is very cognitively advanced. They give you the whole range of like, he's this age and he tests it here and this. So basically what they came back is he's extremely cognitively advanced and he just doesn't want to talk. So I said, okay. So they said clearly all of his needs are being met because he doesn't even feel the need to talk. But you're going to have to start asking, you're going to require him to ask for things if he wants them. Can't anticipate his needs. So this even speaks to the level of like telepathic connection that he and I had, because I could always know what he needed or what he wanted, even if he didn't talk. And that's the kind of relationship that we had. So anyway, I had to start asking him, I had to start insisting that he asks for things so that he would talk. He also did go through speech therapy. So he did have an IEP for speech. So we had a speech therapist that would come to the house and they would start working with him, because since he wasn't talking, his articulation needed a little bit of work, and he had a lisp. So if you've ever seen, like, I don't really post a lot of my son online at this point, but if you ever seen like early videos of my son, he had a so adorable lisp. And so that was something that he had speech therapy that went with him into elementary school. Now, when my son was in elementary school, he was at a normal, he was actually at a bilingual school. I put him in a dual immersion school. So half the day was in English, half the day was in Spanish, which was a little bit challenging for him, but I knew cognitively he was fine because he was always advanced cognitively. And at this point he was, once he started talking, and if you remember also with my son, I would share some of his things. Once he started talking, he would say very prophetic things, right? So he was very advanced cognitively, but he was always just in his own world, right? He was always saying like really deep stuff. And so again, at the age of 4, my son told me that he picked me to be his mother. So I was like, okay, not only is this kid he's sensitive, but I didn't know the term highly sensitive. They didn't give me that verbiage at the time when I had him tested. They just said he doesn't want to talk. But it was on my radar since that age. And they actually really commended me. They were like, it's really commendable that you as a mother are tuned in enough and empowered enough to bring him in to be tested. Many parents do not, and they don't discover until the child is in elementary school when a teacher or someone notices something, and then they get tested, and then they're already trying to play catch up. So I had already been empowered in that way. I put him in a Montessori preschool. So he went to a Montessori preschool. I don't know if you're familiar with Montessori style learning, but anyway, so it's child-centered. So the children are the one who determine the lessons and things like that. So I was always doing everything to try to empower him and kind of give him an advantage. And then when he went to school, he went to a dual immersion school. When he was in about, I would say the 2nd grade, he had a really challenging year. One day, So he had two different teachers. He had a teacher that taught in Spanish, a teacher that taught in English. So the exact same day, and this is how spirit works, because this isn't a coincidence. The exact same day, I had a call from the teacher who was the English teacher, who said, I'm calling all the parents of the students that I felt had an exceptional day today, letting them know, their child's progress and how amazing it's going and all these kinds of things. Boy, I had just before that gotten a call from the Spanish teacher who had said, I'm calling all the parents of the students that had a really challenging day. Jabril had a rough day. His behavior was all over the place and this and that. So when the second teacher called me, I actually was just like dead silent because I was waiting for her to then tell me more about the behavior that the other teacher had described. And I said, I'm just confused because I got a call from his other teacher and she said that she had this experience with him today. And it just seems odd that you're also calling me. So she was like, oh, that wasn't my experience today. I actually had a phenomenal day with him. And I was like, how can my child be two different people in the same day? So I was like, something's going on. So I decided to come in and observe in the classroom for 2 weeks and take notes. So I went into the school and I sat and I observed both classrooms. I supported the classroom too. I volunteered in the class and helped the students, but I was mostly there observing my son, the teachers, and the environment. And what I realized is that the teacher, who was the English teacher, she utilized a lot of things, like she played Beethoven when it was time for the children to be doing quiet work. She would use bells to, when it was time to transition, she would use a bell. The other teacher, the class was extremely chaotic. There was so much noise and it was very overwhelming. And I knew immediately that the environment was affecting him emotionally. And so I asked for a meeting. So the tea is, one day I was actually headed somewhere and I completely telepathically, so they tell you that mom's intuition thing is real. I completely telepathically felt my child, and I went up to his school and I went into his classroom and he was under the desk. I literally walked in at this moment and I said, what are you doing? And he was like, Mommy, you told me that if I needed to take space, I should always take space. So he was literally under the table in the classroom because he needed to take space. He was so overwhelmed with whatever was happening. And the teacher had a problem with this, And so, of course, me being the lioness mommy that I am, I was like, let's go. I literally walked him off school. Got a call from the principal, was like, you can't do that. You can't just take your child out of school. I said, well, I did and I will. If I feel like my child's not safe in an unsafe environment, I absolutely will. And so what I did is I actually contacted a lawyer from the Department of Education and I told them everything that was going on. And I told them that I think that my child has special needs, and that I wanted him to get tested again. And I wanted the department, the school district, to pay for it. And I wanted him to have services put in place so that he could get the support that he needs. And this is something that people might not know, but the Department of Education, the lawyers actually do advocate for the families. So they actually gave me a lawyer that was willing to come with me into a meeting if I needed to. I called for a meeting with the principal, both the teachers, the behavioral specialists, and all the other people. And I basically presented this whole case to the school about highly sensitive children and how this school was absolutely not set up to accommodate children that had this form of special need. And because it didn't fall on the spectrum of like autism or a student that had an IEP, these children were going to suffer because of the school's inability. When I tell you I had these teachers in tears, they were in tears. And so what happened is they paid to get him tested again. And when I had him tested this time, I had him tested neurologically. And they realized that what they called it at that time is, and it's not a disorder, I want to make that clear, it's actually called, I want to remember the exact name of it. It's referred to as sensory input sensitivity or something like that, or it's referred to as something along the lines of like, you can only, sensory integration sensitivity or something like that, right? What they refer to it basically is that you can only take in but so much sensory information before you shut down. So what that means is that if there's too much noise, too much commotion, too many things, the child actually cannot learn. And so what I did is I set up a system of when my child, and I said, if my son comes in the morning, let's say he asks a kid to play with him and the child says no, where other kids might be able to then go into the environment and start learning, my child is going to need time to integrate his emotions before he can be expected to do work. And that's the thing, right? So the system we developed was that several times throughout the day, he would have this piece of paper where it is a very discreet thing. So it wasn't going to make him feel like he was like weird in class or whatever, or isolated. But he would have this questionnaire that was very short. It was like 3 questions, and it would ask him how he was feeling, because I was like, this is all about how he's feeling. So if he came in to class, let's say he came back from lunch and he's feeling angry or tired or something, I said also, some things can be shifted with 5 minutes of maybe meditation, or 5 minutes of time to integrate, or a snack, or something like that, right? So he was kind of given permission to take moments of silence or moments of break to get himself together. And it wasn't an excuse to just do whatever you want, because he was never disruptive in class. He was never like disrupting other kids. It was never that kind of behavioral thing. It would just be that he would shut down and he would not want to do anything. So if he could take 5 minutes to go maybe read or something like that, or do something to kind of integrate himself, then be expected to step back into the environment to learn, then he would be able to do that. So they also put in the classrooms, both the classrooms had a quiet corner. So if a child, because I was like, my son's obviously not the only child that is has this temperament. So I said it's very important for the other children to also that have this to be able to function in this way and be empowered. Maybe they can go sit in the corner and put headphones on or something like that. So I spent an immense amount of time in the classroom for the next 3 years with my son, making sure that the environment that he needed was being integrated. And the reason that this was so helpful for me was because I, at the same time, was learning that I was highly sensitive and that I didn't have parents who supported me, and I didn't have an environment that supported me. I was put in a lot of environments that were very traumatic for me as a child. And so it was helpful for me to be able to do this for my son and to be able to empower him and let him know that these are his gifts of sensitivity. And now you all know that, most of my work is being an advocate, a coach, and a teacher for people who are highly sensitive. So I've made this my focus for my career and my work. So I love this so much. So I wanted to give you all the background story of how in my real life this came to be a thing. And so it was because of needing to support my child that I really came into understanding this for myself and understanding how many other people needed this. I remember at some point, I had discovered this book by Elaine Aron, Highly Sensitive Person. And when I was reading it, I remember, and I said this in the SoundCloud post, that I threw the book across the room, and I was like, no way, because it's like you're reading a book that you could have written. Like that's how it felt. I felt like I was reading a book that was like the never-ending story style book of, like I'm reading my life here. So all of that to say, when I was still identifying as an empath at that time, it still felt very empowering. At some point, I started to realize that some of what, now we're going to get into this, some of this stuff of why I no longer identify as an empath, some of what I started to realize that was about being a so-called empath actually had, so this is the thing, in the research that has to do with being a highly sensitive person. So in psychology, I believe that they disregard the idea of being an empath, and they call it, they consider it woo-woo. But being a highly sensitive person is something that is accepted scientifically. It is something that can be tested, and it is something that is neurological. It is something that has to do with your nervous system, and it is something that has to do with the brain, the way your brain works. Excuse me. So that is something that you absolutely that can be tested in the way that your brain functions. Now, when it gets into this thing of like, I'm an empath and all this kind of stuff, those kinds of terms start to become a little bit more nebulous and harder to define. But what I started to realize is that from a spiritual perspective, right, from a more spiritual perspective, what I'd say is this: we have to understand that the personality that we created here isn't necessarily the truth of who we are, right? And look at it like this. Think about the idea of, like, let's say some people say, well, you can't stop being an empath because it's your gift. Imagine if you were given a gift of like being an athlete, or if you were given a gift of being a writer, you're being a gift of being able to sing, and you decided, I don't want to use that gift. You have the ability to do that. Why would this be any different? And that's how I saw it. I saw the idea of like being an empath as a gift that I just didn't want to utilize. And I wanted to empower my other gifts. Now, what's interesting, and I've mentioned this before, when I stopped identifying as an empath is actually when my other gifts came on stronger. My other gifts are telepathy and channeling. When I stopped identifying as an empath and I stopped playing that role as an empath and I stopped using my empathic gifts, my ability to read people's energy telepathically and my ability to channel and to know things and just know things in that way and to turn on my other gifts stronger and to turn down the gift of absorbing other people's energy into my body was what I didn't want. I had experienced physical pain in my body for so long. I had experienced an overwhelmed, triggered nervous system. I had experienced over empathy, and I had experienced trauma bonding, all these things. And what I also realized is that from when I was a child in the womb, when I did the most extensive round of like healing work that I did, I realized that many of the things, and this is something that I had learned with a healer through muscle testing, all of the things that I was still working on clearing, my money issues, my relationship issues, all of the deeper stuff, when I was tested, it all led back to when I was in the womb. So that means that since I was in the womb, I was absorbing other people's energy, right? So that intimacy, those intimacy injuries of like, to me, what being in a relationship meant was that I was absorbing all the other person's trauma and pain and transmuting it and everything. I was like, I'm done. I've been doing this since I was in the womb, right? I was empathing my mother's depression when I was a child. And the other thing that I learned about empathing that I realized is that, and I tweeted this yesterday, and I was like, I'm waiting to get roasted. Some of what we call being an empath is actually, it's actually enmeshment, and it's normalized overfunctioning due to trauma bonding. It's low boundaries, right? And you thinking that you justify it as, oh, well, I'm an empath, so it's okay that I'm a doormat for everyone else's unhealed trauma. That didn't work. That wasn't working for me anymore. I have no issue with being sensitive, and I have no issue with being aware, and I have no issue with being able to read people's energy when I want to. I do have an issue, however, and I was like, I don't agree to this anymore. And I no longer feel like I want to be responsible for this. I do not agree with living a life of I can't go places because my physical body is going to absorb everyone else's trash. I said, I don't think so, right? You become agoraphobic. Absolutely. I became agoraphobic. And I became completely fear of socializing, fear of public spaces, fear of everything. I was afraid of everything. And so again, we want to use words in a way that are empowering. All of that for me was associated with being an empath. For me. Right? And so for me, the things that I associated with being highly sensitive were all things I loved. My relationship with sound, my relationship with taste, my ability to taste things and feel the subtlety and the nuance in them, my ability to hear music and hear sounds, my ability to see nuance and texture in all of life and see beauty and all of these things. For me, I loved that, and I love being highly sensitive. I just didn't love the part where I was absorbing it into my physical body. So that's the distinction for me. The distinction for being highly sensitive and being an empath is an empath to me, and again, everyone's definitions are their own. An empath for me is when you actually are a psychic sponge and you absorb it into your body, as opposed to being able to be aware of subtlety and nuance through your psychic senses. So I hope that makes sense. When I did that, I realized that being an empath had absolutely taught me the range of emotions. It taught me a lot about my psychic senses. It taught me about, I said, like, the thing people sometimes say about me is that they were like, your ability to describe things is so precise, right? Like when I am reading someone's energy and I'm like, you know what it is? It's almost like this person has this and that, and I'll give a metaphor for it, and someone will say, I've never heard someone describe it to the T like that. Like that's exactly what it is. Or if I notice someone's behavior, I'll say, it's this. They're doing this kind of thing where they kind of want attention, but they don't know how to ask for it. So Me being an empath, me feeling the feelings in my body that other people had that were not maybe feelings that I had, it absolutely gave me the training for my emotional intelligence. Absolutely. However, when I got to the point where I didn't need any more of that training to happen in my physical body, I didn't need my nervous system to be overwhelmed and to be feeling that feeling. I wanted to instead be able to look at someone and read them telepathically without needing to physically feel the feeling they're feeling. That's the difference. That's what I left behind of being an empath. Doesn't mean my psychic gifts aren't still highly attuned. And it doesn't mean that I also can feel other people's feelings. And often in very, very intimate relationships, intimate things, right, where there is some enmeshment, I recognize it as enmeshment. I recognize it as not being self-differentiated. I recognize it as not having clear boundaries, right? And you guys, I have 5 planets in Pisces. So I'm very enmeshy, right? Like, I'm like, we're all one, right? But for me, again, what became empowering is when I wasn't absorbing it in my physical body, in my physical vessel, and I started to heal my nervous system, and I started to empower my nervous system. This is the thing too about being an empath. When you're an empath, again, this is my experience. When you're an empath, and that fear that you're going to take it into your physical body, you might get sick, you might get ill, you might be in pain. Your nervous system has this defensiveness on it. You don't really engage with life, right? To me, that was my experience. When I stopped absorbing it and I just started observing it, I started healing my nervous system, and I started to be able to say, right, wow, I can see what's happening. For example, a lot of times empaths feel you'll get sick. Like the first time I did private sessions, the first week I did it, I was sick in bed, sick. And I was emotionally fine. Sick in bed, sick from doing work with other people. And I was like, I don't want this. This is not, right? I was like, yeah, I want to be able to read people's energy, right? So how can I do this? So that's when I was shown how to do it. Spirit showed me exactly how to do it. And I'm going to talk about that. Okay. So I want to go through and talk about extrasensory perception a little bit. I want to talk about highly sensitivity for a little bit. And I want to talk about more of the distinction of what I consider to be highly sensitive as opposed to being an empath. And again, what I want to say is empower yourself. If this stuff resonates with you, great. If you're like, no, I still consider myself an empath and have a different definition, great. All of that works for me. Just giving you this perspective, what worked for me, and how things, when I say things drastically changed for me, drastically, my whole life changed, right? So again, a highly sensitive person is a person that has extrasensory perception. Many people are aware of clairvoyance as the psychic gift, right? Excuse me. But there are many different other forms of it where you're born with this innate ability to perceive the world through non-physical overtones of feeling, emotion, sound, dreams, visions. You can pick up on people's thoughts, feelings, ideas, emotions, intentions, urges, states of being, and all other pieces of vibrational information, right? Not only from people, but also from the environment. So I feel like highly sensitives hear musical composition, we taste more flavor in food, we step into the ocean and we become one with it, we watch a movie and we can become the character, and we also channel, right? We feel everything. We feel what's not spoken out loud, we feel people's fears, and we feel their pain. Again, I would distinguish actually feeling it in the physical body as an empathing thing, whereas being able to read it or sense it is a different, I'd call that in the realm of like extrasensory gifts. We know things people are hiding from themselves, and we don't know how we know. So again, I put this in the realm of telepathy. My whole life, I've had this experience where I've said things that I've seen or noticed. I might say, I remember when I was a child, I said to my dad, why don't you like that person? And I got in trouble. And I just was saying, just something, someone's wearing a blue sweater. Like I was saying something that felt so obvious to me. But I remember being able to see things that other people didn't see about themselves or they were unaware of, right? Let's see. It's very hard to lie to people who are extrasensories, when they're tuned in. We perceive nuance, right? And here are a couple of other gifts of extrasensory, highly sensitivity gifts that you may not be familiar with. Psychometry. This is the ability to pick up an object or a photograph and receive information from that. To receive psychic information from looking at a photograph, or like an object, maybe a book. You can feel the person that had it before you. I have a lot of jewelry that is like, you know, vintage or antique, collectible stuff, and I love that. I've actually had dreams where I have a lot of dreams about my relationship with jewelry where I can tell where the piece of jewelry is from or things like that. Telepathy is an interesting one, and it's really hard to describe. It was actually Pamela Erlin, you may all know, my friend and mentor, who told me that my strongest gift was telepathy. She's like, your strongest psychic gift is telepathy. And she also told me, your gifts are not human. She was like, you are going to have a very hard time finding anyone who's going to be able to tell you about your gifts. She was like, because they're not human. And she said, you are just going to have to remember how to use them yourself. I've had many, many dreams, and this is what I feel New Earth Mystery School is. I've had many dreams where I had a school that was like a school for X-Men. It was a school for people that had like superhuman gifts. And I knew one day I was going to have it. And I think that's why I loved working with autistic children, because I think that they're actually very, very psychically gifted. I didn't know this at the time, but I think that, again, children like my son, whether you want to call them crystal children or rainbow children or indigos or whatever, that there's children, ourselves included, that come here with these extrasensory gifts and all of that. Now, when I was identified as an empath, I thought part of my role was to feel the pain of the earth, of the humanity, transmute it. And then I basically was like, that's a shit job. I'm sorry. That was my experience. I was like, I don't want that job. I don't want to be on trash cleanup. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So mediumship channeling. So you guys know I have that as well. The ability to communicate with the presence of energies and spirits. Physical healing. So there's a medical mediumship, where you can actually, and I took a class on medical mediumship with Pamela before, and I actually was like, yeah, I don't want that. I was like, I don't want that. And all these gifts are things that you may have it, again, it may have a natural gift, and you may be able to awaken it more through practicing. I thought that I wanted to do medical mediumship, to be able to scan people's bodies and see what illnesses they had. And one thing that Pamela said, she was like, if you think channeling takes over your whole life, medical mediumship takes over your whole entire life. And I was like, no, I'm cool. Thank you. So physical healing. So I don't do a lot of, so to speak, physical healing. I do mostly, you guys know I do mostly emotional body healing, which again, and I do work on the nervous system. So emotional healing, working people's emotions, that's what I specialize in. Animal communication, the ability to communicate with animals. Nature, the ability to talk to plants. So I have that as well. Obviously, you guys know that resonance was based on basically the plants telling me what they want to do in the formulas that I make. People always ask me, like, how did you learn how to work with plants? I'm like, the plants taught me what they do. The plants absolutely talk to me. Some people don't feel plants talk to them. I don't feel animals talk to me, and that's okay. Plants absolutely talk to me. Try to work on my cat telepathy a lot. My cat, we kind of just started to click in, but most of the time, I just don't have anything. Me and babies, everybody knows me as the baby whisperer. I absolutely can communicate telepathically with babies, for sure. Geomancy, the ability to read the energy of places and land, especially ley lines. I also have that. I also have geomancy. which is a really interesting one. You will be called to certain vortex places, certain places where certain energy is. You'll get certain energy activations, and that one's a cool one as well. Precognition, the ability to feel when something is about to happen. I have that as well. Claircognizance, to receive knowing about a circumstance. It's just a clear, strong knowing that goes beyond your own experience. I also have that. And then being an empath, being able to psychically absorb others' information. So again, these distinctions that I'm making, I'm telling you guys about all the different extrasensory gifts. There's so many more. There's so many more psychic phenomenon. And again, when I said no thank you to being an empath, I focused on my other gifts and they became stronger. I think the thing for me that I didn't like about being an empath was that I could not tell what was mine and what was someone else's. All of a sudden, I would feel upset, angry, this, that, or the other, and I could not distinguish what it was because I don't take anything to my physical body now. I can sense that there's anger around or someone's anger, but I don't physically feel it. I think highly sensitives are very attracted to the underdog. We're very attracted to issues around justice, for sure. And I think that there's this normal thing that people have when they sense pain. It's a natural defense thing of self-preservation where you withdraw, and I think it's referred to as the selfish gene. I think that people who are actively empaths lack this gene. I think that they're actually attracted to pain. This is why, and I can talk about this more, this is why there's that relationship with the empath and the narcissist. I knew that I would officially retire being an empath when I was no longer attracting narcissists. So that for me was the side bonus of retiring. I also feel that taking on too many emotions can be detrimental to our health. If you do not know how to properly release them, I do think that it is absolutely possible. I do know some people that I think are very empowered as empaths, and they have a very strong practice of being able to release the things that they feel without it crippling them. That was not my experience. My experience was that it was very detrimental to my health. So sensitives in general have a highly tuned nervous system. The nervous system is working overtime to process input, so we're receiving information from the environment. So the thing about being a sensitive, and this is very important to teach to people that you know, I have to teach this to anyone that I am in partnership with romantically. When I'm overstimulated, I'm not available. When I'm overstimulated, the only thing that I need to do is to withdraw to take care of myself. When my nervous system is overstimulated and my mood changes, it's because I cannot take in any more information. I cannot hear what you're saying. I cannot do anything, right? So I'm not feeling safe. I'm over-aroused, overstimulated, and I'm gonna shut down. I need to be able to disengage, and I don't need to be perceived as being moody, bitchy, depressed, bipolar, or any of those kinds of things, right? I am overstimulated, and if I'm allowed to take care of myself, everything's gonna be all right. So I say I need about 20 minutes of focused self-care to recover from overstimulation. And so that's something that you have to educate people on as a highly sensitive. I also have to live a lifestyle of a highly sensitive, which means that I don't like clutter. I don't like clutter. I can't deal with clutter. It's just too much information happening. It's too many things happening. So I need things to be organized in a certain way. I can't deal with living with people that use toxic cleaning materials. I can't deal with certain perfumes. I can't deal with certain loud noises. I can't deal with any of that kind of stuff. So my home has to be my sanctuary, and I need to be able to monitor my environment in a way where I can do that. You guys know, or maybe you don't know, Resonance Apothecary was born out of, it's for highly sensitive people, right? So all of the essential oils are basically, okay, so you're sensitive, but you still got to function out in the world. So what do you need? Okay, you need an auric shield. Okay, you need grounding, because sensitives a lot of times get ungrounded. You need this. So all of the plants are there to support the things that sensitives go through in their life and how they need to manage them. So my very first spray that I ever made was called the Empath spray. And obviously was identifying as an empath at that time. Now I always say that the graduation from the empath spray is the ascension spray, which is very interesting because they actually smell very similar and they have not one single of the same scents in them, which is an interesting thing. So obviously everyone that is part of the Resonance Apothecary subscriber will get Empath Medicine this month. Today, everything's now. I also had the tea that's called Higher Self Tea. It was the tea that I created that I used to heal my nervous system. I've been doing nervous system work for, oh my God, I don't even know. I can't even identify years, at least 6 years. So I've been working with a nervous system specialist. So I'm very, very interested in the things that support the nervous system. My nervous system is my instrument. Is it like a finely tuned instrument? It is what allows me to feel all the things that I'm feeling in the environment. It gives me information. It's what lets me, everyone's like, you're always on time. How are you always on time? Like, my nervous system is highly tuned, right? If you are in the Bay Area, if someone's asking who is your specialist, if you're in the Bay Area, I'm happy to give you that information. She is amazing. And I am going to have her as a guest on my podcast soon. Maybe this month. I have to talk to her. But she's such an amazing healer. So she will be able to, I'm going to ask her a lot of questions when I have her as a guest about just all that kind of stuff. But you can absolutely always do the research to find people in your area that do that kind of work. For me, I've worked with a couple different people, and she's my person. And it took me trying many different people to be able to find that right person. So now it's the most important thing for me, for my nervous system to be, my body, my whole entire body needs to be healthy. Obviously, I don't want to be sick or cold. So my acupuncturist, I love to, but for the work that I do, having my nervous system in tune is absolutely one of the most important thing for me to feel like myself. That way I can tell when I'm overstimulated. If you're in a constant state of overstimulation, what happens is you normalize over functioning, you normalize trauma bonding, you normalize survival mode, you normalize fight or flight. None of those kinds of things are normal for me. My normal state of being is feeling like everything's in the flow. That's how I feel most of the time. So for me, empaths have a hard time with boundaries. This is why I do not identify as an empath. I do not have a hard time with boundaries. I am extremely good at boundaries. I think that there's something that I call the empath episode. And that means what I would call an empath episode is, again, the empathic episode can be lashing out because the empath has taken on someone else's feelings and they're not able to discern what they feel, and therefore they're not able to discern what they need, right? They're in harmonic resonance with the other person's feelings. So they're matching that other person's feelings. And then they are acting out of that place and they're on an emotional roller coaster, and then they lash out. And then they feel bad afterwards. And this is why I'm calling it specifically empath episode, because then they feel bad afterwards. Like, oh my God. Because the thing about an empath is empath cannot deal with hurting someone. Empath cannot deal with hurting someone. Because why? Because they feel the person's pain. And when you know that you were the cause, we'll use that term loosely, you feel so guilty, right? So you lash out because of how you're feeling, and then you feel bad, right? And that's why I call that emotional roller coaster the empath episode. Here's some other traits that we're going to go through and we'll talk about, but are between the highly sensitives and the empath. Highly sensitive just know things. We don't know how we know. We talk about that. Public places can be overwhelming. They have a low threshold for sensory information, which can lead to over-arousal. We talked about that. Empaths are psychic sponges that absorb everything. Is it you? Highly sensitives are adverse to watching violent or scary movies or the news. We know when someone's lying. We can sense when someone is saying one thing and feeling another. We're attracted to the underdog. I would say empaths are often the grounds for dumping, right? They're dumping grounds for other people's issues and problems. The other thing I feel like empaths have, which I don't have, is savior complex. And here's why. Because here's why. For me, if I see someone else in suffering, I'm able to separate myself from them enough that I don't need to try to fix them. I don't need anything, because how they feel is not how I feel. When how someone else feels determines how you feel, what's the natural course of action? You want to fix how they're feeling. So it naturally lends to this place where you need to try to fix how the other person, you don't feel comfortable sitting with someone else who is in their pain. So for example, if someone else cried, you automatically cry. If someone else is going through something, you're going through it. So you automatically, right, lose that sense of boundaries, and you actually feel like it's the compassionate thing to do to try to save someone. Where because I'm not empathing, I feel like the compassionate thing to do is to allow the person to sit with their feelings that are based on their own creation. Because I know that they need to work with those feelings and those emotions and that situation. And I am feeling how I'm feeling, right? I'm feeling how I'm feeling in my own space. And the person can be how they're feeling in their own space. I can hold space for them, but I don't get drawn in. So I stay grounded, I stay where I am, and I'm able to offer a neutral perspective, right? I'm able to offer a neutral perspective because the physical sensations in my body aren't confusing me. Does that make sense? I hope I explained it in a way that makes sense. When your reason for needing to fix the other person comes from the fact that you are so in a physical discomfort yourself, what you're actually trying to do by fixing them is relieving yourself of this discomfort. So for example, I'll give you an example. I had a roommate who was struggling financially, and I was watching it, but I wasn't feeling it. And I saw from a non-judgmental perspective that she was uncomfortable with the fact that I was not struggling financially. She couldn't deal with the fact that I wouldn't actually physically feel bad when I would observe her in the place that she was in. Meanwhile, I could clearly see why she was in the place that she was in. clearly, so clearly, but I didn't feel the need to fix her. I didn't give her advice. I didn't try to tell her what she should do. I didn't try to live her life for her. I let her live her own path. And it actually, at one point, she was like, you're the most not compassionate person I know. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting perspective, because it's so used to like what compassion looks like is if you feel bad, I feel bad. Like, but is me physically feeling bad actually helping you? Or is me staying in a place of my joy and my empowerment? I actually have the ability to potentially help you because I'm modeling a different way. Does that make sense? So again, the normal thing is to feel like, oh my God, I can't stay in my joy if there's pain in the world. I have to physically feel bad. And that's the difference. That's why I say I'm not an empath. I don't emotionally absorb what is happening. Now, don't get me wrong. Some days when I'm sick or, I'm just not in my power or whatever, some things do take me out. They lay me out, and I may be in bed crying for days. But it used to be like that every week. With the injustices that were going on in the world, I could not physically function in my life, and I just didn't see how that was actually helping anyone. Okay, so the other thing, constant fatigue. I would say empaths need a lot of sleep because they're in constant state of fatigue from all the emotional processing that all the transmutation they're doing, all the emotional processing they're doing. I remember my ex used to be like, you sleep more than any person I've ever met. One of the main things that characterizes being an empath is a lack of mastery of the solar plexus. Now, I wish I had my aura photos to show you all. I had 0 solar plexus, right? 0 solar plexus. I had nothing. It was non-existent. I had no throat and no solar plexus. It was nothing. After doing this, and again, when I started to say I was retired as an empath, is when I started to get this information about the nervous system, about the solar plexus, and about not absorbing, and about energetic boundaries. I came across a book by Cindy Dale called Energetic Boundaries, and I ended up doing some work with her. She's amazing. So the solar plexus is the seat of emotions. It's associated with self-confidence, self-worth. It's the place where we feel we're all one. So the idea of being separate is counterintuitive. Empaths literally feel we are one with all people, and that's why the emotional absorbing happens. Highly sensitives are healers. They're drawn to holistic therapies and all things metaphysical, all the supernatural things. Nothing is too out there for most extrasensories. They need a lot of solitude. We go crazy if we don't have quiet time. I believe that many highly sensitive children are being misdiagnosed, and this is a huge part of my personal work. Highly sensitives are very creative. We understand nuance in the form of expressions like singing, dancing, acting, drawing, writing. We have a very vivid imagination. We have a thirst for knowledge. We have a way of knowing something, so we continue to seek answers for confirmation. The downside of this can be information overload. Because if you feel a lot of things and you don't have like confirmation that what you're feeling is the truth, and you're constantly doing research to be like, is this download that I'm getting? Is this information that I'm getting? Is this dream that I'm having? Is it real? Can it be real? Can I trust it? Right? I think that one of the things of being an empath is that you don't trust what you feel. And of course you don't, because half the time what you're feeling is not yours. So it makes sense that you don't trust yourself. I feel that highly sensitives are free spirits. One thing I will say, and this is from the research, highly sensitives it's not the same thing as introversion. Many highly sensitives are actually extroverted. Let's see. I think highly sensitives are constantly excited. I don't know if you remember my pleasure blueprint. I asked, does the idea of sensory curation excite you? Does the idea of sensory curation overwhelm you? So that was a questionnaire that we did where we were talking about sensory information. The idea of sensory information, new sights, new sounds, it excites me because I know how to deal with over-arousal. We love nature. We feel extremely at peace with the soothing vibrations that nature offers and is a very safe, non-emotional friend, right? We love intimacy. So we may not always feel safe with people, but we feel safe with nature, and we maybe feel safe with pets. So I find that highly sensitives often either like are really, really into animals or they're really, really into nature. They cannot deal with clutter. I feel like and this may not all apply to you, but some of these might resonate. Like a simple life, because again, we don't want to worry about overstimulation. It's interesting because my house has a lot of stuff. You may see my house has a lot of prints and things like that. But again, it's like I curate it in a way that the amount of sensory input that I'm getting feels really good for me. Highly sensitives can tend to feel ungrounded. We can get carried away. This is why learning techniques like grounding and shielding and being able to clear our energy field are so important. Sensitives are vivid dreamers. We have a large range of mystical experiences, including out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams, deja vu, synchronicity, spontaneous past parallel life remembrances, even near-death experiences, which I've had all of. The other day, my son came home and he's like, "Mom, I just had so many synchronicities today that it's just such a norm. It's just normal." I said, "What? Tell me one of them." Apparently, he had checked out a book from the library called Coraline, and then in the after-school program, that was the movie they were watching. So he's like, "I've just had so many, Mom. It's just so many." So cute. So I do feel like people with psychic traits and the ability to read energy and work with energy are here for a specific reason. And that we have a very specific life path that has to do with the healing arts. This is why I love to work with this demographic and to support them in being empowered. So along with energy work, body work, lifestyle changes for any extrasensories, empaths, sensitives, whatever it is you are, it's for the purpose of healing the planet. We know that. But the important thing to remember, and this is my mantra from wherever, whenever, service is not sacrifice. I need to reinforce that over and over again, because this is not, I think for me, the appeal of being an empath is it was romanticized. It was so, the empath lure, it was so romantic. It was so appealing. You know, it was almost intoxicating. When I realized service is not sacrifice, everything changed. I started to understand all of my unmet childhood needs and how that led to some of my empathing and how there was a difference. The biggest shift took place for me when I realized that I did not have to sacrifice my well-being, my happiness for anyone else. And I realized that how I feel, my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts literally create matter. So when I say my feelings matter, they literally create matter. That's what I create with. I create with my feelings, my emotions. And so I need my energy body to feel clear and to be my own, full of myself, literally. So in order to nurture my own wholeness and happiness, I had to let go of several things, several ways of relating that I associated with being an empath that were no longer serving me. So the need to be a people pleaser, enabling someone's destructive behavior, doing people's work for them, being a martyr, savior, or scapegoat for other people's unresolved trauma, forcing myself out of guilt to spend time with people out of a sense of duty, giving energy to people who are careless with my feelings or my emotions, the addiction to being a victim, enmeshment, and codependency. So much of this dysfunction was from my childhood. I grew up in a home with domestic violence, and so it was very important for me to be able to, I learned very quickly to be able to read the emotions of what was happening in the house, and I was always the one who was trying to shift the energy so that it didn't escalate. So that for me is part of what my empathing came from, right? Let's see what else. The practice of releasing what doesn't belong to you, I started to, around that time, I started to say, I release this energy that does not belong to me. I release these emotions that do not belong to me. That was like my mantra for a while. And I didn't want to be a transmuter. Also, obviously, cord cutting, seeing those relationships that were with the empath narcissist relationship where I would be feeling the feeling of the other person, the narcissistic person, and because I would be feeling their feelings through the cord, we talked about cords last month, I'd be feeling their feelings through the cord, and I would get confused about my own feelings. So I would stay in things longer that were toxic, that were energetically draining, and that were not equal energy exchange, right? So we can feel on a subtle level the person sending us unhealthy, harmful, fearful energy, even if it's unconscious. But when you're not empathing their feelings, you're like, ooh, that's not mine. So that's the practice of cord cutting. And then obviously, the other types of healing work are releasing soul agreements and karmic agreements. So I believe that agreeing to play the role of an empath can be a soul contract. And I just revoked that contract. And I started reframing with telling a different story and empowering the new story. I also do believe in releasing and letting energy go through conscious crying or conscious expression. I do believe that crying is a gift from source that allows us to discharge suppressed emotions. So I absolutely allow my body to inform me of the ways that it wants me to support it when it's time for an emotional discharge. And then the last thing that I want to say before we move into questions is talking about forgiveness. So if you have been in a relationship where it's empath narcissist relationship, I'm going to talk more about that next class in detail. But if you have been in that relationship, it could be time for forgiveness. It could be time to say, wow, I understand why I manifested that relationship and what I wanted to learn, and be done with the lesson. Be done with the lesson if you are ready to. The last thing, I don't know if we've done this before, but the Ho'oponopono prayer is such a powerful healing tool. And it is it's 4 lines. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And if you're not familiar with the Ho'oponopono prayer, it's a really powerful tool that you can use. There is a story of this doctor that came into this, I forget the type of facility that it was, if it was a psychiatric facility or just, there was a lot of people that were ill, that were sick there. He came in every day and he would go into his office and he wouldn't see any of the patients. But the patients all started getting better. And finally, someone was asking, how are these people getting better? What are they doing? And the doctor explained that he was using the Ho'oponopono prayer. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And the reason that he said that it was working is because he was releasing, he was asking forgiveness from the part of him that needed them to be the sick person. So someone said he did this as he held their charts in his hand. Yes. So it was such a profound thing to think like, oh, wow, like I actually asked the narcissist to do that, to play that role for me in my life, right? So it might be like, some might be like, okay, you lost me there, right? But it's just an example of how the Ho'oponopono prayer can be utilized. You can do it with someone that you feel like you're still holding on to some anger for, and just say, because it might be like, what am I saying thank you for, right? And it's just a very, very deep way of saying, whatever part of me asked you, even if it was unconscious, whatever part of me asked you to play that role, thank you. Thank you. Oftentimes when I have something that, it's because it's an embodied practice. So it's coming from a place of like having done this work for a long time. When something happens that in my life that feels kind of traumatic, I'll be like, thank you. Just thank you. Right. And it's a way of just like cutting through the processing time to get to the end, which is that I'm grateful. You know why? Because I don't have to repeat this again. I got it. I don't need to go through every stage of like, oh, wow, I called you in. Oh, why? Oh, this. For me now, sometimes I can go right to gratitude and just be like, you know what? Thank you. Because the expansion that I'm going to have from this experience is going to be so good, and it always happens like that. Not saying to do that if you need the processing time, great. If you need to be angry first and all of that, and not saying that's not okay, right? So there's a story. There's many stories, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, with teachers who are who use this sword. Right? Who use this sword to cut the student. And they say that, I love Tori said this, they say that it takes a teacher that really loves you to be able to use that sword on you, right? So for example, some of the examples that they might give is in Tibetan Buddhism, they may say, build this house, now break it down. Now build another house, now destroy it. And it's this understanding that it's the same impulse to create in spirit is the same impulse to destroy. It's that destructive part of spirit that we have an issue with, that we're attached to certain things. We don't like things to change, right? So it's the teacher that really takes someone that really loves you to say, and again, if this is too out there for you, that's totally fine. Because on some level, it's like, no, this is abuse and no, right? But on another level, it does happen like this sometimes, that there is someone who loves you so much that agrees that I'm going to do this thing that, it's almost like you can hear the higher selves talking. Okay, when we're down on earth, I'm going to do this thing and you're going to hate me for it. But you're agreeing to that. You need this experience, and because I love you, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do it because I know that this is what you need to experience. This is what you want to experience, right? And on the higher self level, you understand that, right? Doesn't even mean you have to condone the relationship with the person here in 3D. You don't. But it has happened with me in my lifetime sometimes where me and both of the people have awakened and we've remembered, oh my God, we agreed to play this role, and I can just move into a place of gratitude because I learned the lesson, and now we can completely change our relationship, right? So that does happen. Sometimes that realization doesn't happen until you leave physical, but I have had the blessing of having that awakening with people in this lifetime where we remember our agreements to do things that felt traumatic here in this reality as teachers to each other. So I hope that was helpful to you all. There are many other things that I think can be helpful for highly sensitives and people that identify as empaths. Aura shielding, establishing healthy boundaries, spiritual bath. Again, I talked about earth medicine, laughter medicine, working with the archangels, golden light meditation, the Tonglen meditation, mindfulness, non-attachment, Maitreya, which is the cultivating loving kindness meditation, the Ho'oponopono. I mean, there's just so many practices I think that are good for everyone, but I think especially for highly sensitives, learning to do like the golden light meditation, violet flame meditation, transmutation, another great one. Absolutely. So I see that there are already some questions in the Q&A. If you have not already, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will take a look. Okay, some of these questions we may have already covered. Let's see what we have. The chat is lit today. Yeah, it really is. Is there a difference between highly sensitive and empath? I think we covered that. Okay. Sarah Quinn, can you share a bit more about your channeling practice? What do you do daily? So for me, and if you have questions, again, put them in the Q&As where I'm looking at right now. For me, my channel was opened many years ago. Excuse me. I can't even remember. I have to sit and try to remember everything I did in the beginning initially to kind of open the channel. Well, initially, I would say that at some point I realized that I was receiving messages from the divine. And I wanted to be in that role of being a vessel and a conduit. And so I asked, I said to God or spirit or the universe or the divine, use me as a vessel. And that was my intention. And from that place, I was led into the priestess path, where I would be very, very often in the role of like receiving messages from the divine and doing ceremony and leading ceremony in that way. And I was also doing private client work at the time. So I would also, you know, anyone that's done private session with me, know I don't do tarot cards. I don't do anything. I just receive messages from the divine from my own, like knowing, from my own channeling. And now what I would say that I do is meditate, but honestly, the channel is just open all the time. I just receive insight and inspiration and intuition all the time. But in the beginning, when I was wanting to tap into that more, I was setting the intention that I wanted to be a vessel and that I wanted spirit to speak through me. And that sometimes I would do, oh, now I remember, I'm like, what did I do? I would do, what is it called? You guys know what I'm talking about. I would do free writing, automatic writing. Yeah, I was like, what is it called? Automatic writing, which is just, it's a way to clear the channel. You just start writing. You don't filter it. You don't try to, you guys see now, like when I go probably on Instagram or Twitter, I'll just be like, brrr. So once I open the stream of consciousness, it just goes. It's just coming through. Now, there is something to be said for learning how to connect what you're receiving as an impulse, as a knowing, and being able to translate it into words. That's the part that takes practice. And that's the part where I think writing can be helpful. I love that someone shared a Karen Neverland link for the Violet Flame. I do think her work is awesome. So that's what I say that I started. For me, on the other hand, I have more of my issue now is more too much comes through. My issue is not how do I open a channel? My issue is that too much comes through. And some people have a different experience, so they might be able to support you a little bit more. But for me, as I said, as you probably have, can follow on my, when you follow me on Instagram or Twitter or wherever, and I just, right? It's just so much is coming through. And I used to be worried that like, oh my God, I have to write everything down that's coming through and I have to no. I feel better now that I can, if it's something I need to know, it'll come back up. So that's my process now. So I do meditate every day. I do take care of my body. Again, because I feel like our nervous system is our antenna. I do work on my nervous system. So I do work on how my body is feeling. When my body is feeling good, I'm channeling all day long, all the time. So, okay, let's get back to the top. A month before my perfectly healthy dog soulmate died, I went through intense grief. While he was there to comfort me, I couldn't figure out why I was so sad at the time. After he died, I realized it was an advanced feeling as this precognition. Okay. Oh, a month before I went through intense grief. I couldn't figure out why I was so sad at the time. Possibly. I mean, I don't think it's so important necessarily to like label things. That's kind of part of what I'm saying. If it feels empowering for you to say that was precognition, then great. I see things before they happen often. Many times in dream, I talked about this in a dream class. So if it's something that just happened one time, it might have just been a surge of like psychic awareness because you're so close to this being, for sure. But again, if it's not something that's happening regularly, maybe that it's starting to open up for you, because that can happen. Actually, this is a good point. Your gifts can come on. Your gifts can absolutely come on because you have a specific experience. Like you can have, let's say someone transition, and then because for some reason your connection with that being or that person was so strong that you realize that after they transition, you're still in communication with them. And then you realize that your gifts like got turned on. So things can happen. I had a near-death experience and then my gifts came on strong. So that was my experience. When I started having, one thing I didn't talk about, when we talk about this more in next class, is the relationship with being an empath and anxiety. I used to have major anxiety attacks when I was still identifying as empath, psychic attacks and anxiety attacks. And we'll definitely talk about that next time because we'll have Jamie here to support us. But after I had my NDE, my near-death experience, everything completely changed. Everything completely changed. What products help with grounding? And someone's taking talk a little bit more about grounding. How do we know we need to feel grounded? Okay. There's a product in my shop called Earthing. It's great. It's actually not one of the ones that's super popular, but it smells so good. And it has all of the, it has like pine and spruce and rosewood, and like it has just a lot of really like earthy scents in it. But like sometimes when things get too earthy, they smell too woodsy. The way that the blend that came to me and that's in there, so good. So it's it's one of the ones that I carry with me a lot. Also, believe it or not, this spot here is great. So when we do the tapping, when we do all the different spots, this spot here is great for grounding. And we're gonna have Jamie talk more about different acupuncture spots to sort of do this. Also in the ear, this spot here, if you can see it, this is an important spot to shift from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. So that means instead of you empathing everything, you turn back into yourself. So we'll talk a little bit more about the nervous system in next class too, and we'll talk about some of those spots. So that's also putting your feet on the earth, super good. Putting your feet in water, salt baths. For me, also food. Food is very, very grounding for me, what you eat. How do you work on your solar plexus and throat chakra? I work with my chakras through visualization and through taking action. So something that might seem like too obvious, working on your throat chakra, talking more, telling your truth more, right? Solar plexus, boundaries, establishing clear boundaries. You're gonna see a shift in the physical when you start acting, behaving in a certain way. You can work with certain oils and stones and things like that. The solar plexus is associated with yellow. So maybe you would wear yellow. Maybe you would spend more time in the sun. Maybe you would, just bring. I sometimes when I do sometimes work with certain place in the body, a certain energy, I will do an altar. That's all of that. So maybe you would do an altar with sunflowers and all yellow. What's the highly sensitive person book you mentioned? It's Elaine Aron. So that she also has a highly sensitive for children book and a highly sensitive person in relationships books. But this one I think is the best. Okay, I'm only going to answer the ones that are related to this class. My therapist said I'm overstimulated. How do I live a highly sensitive lifestyle and recharge? So I'll give you an example of my day. First thing I do when I wake up is I burn certain scents and I play certain music. I like to play birds chirping, or I like to play Tibetan bowls. I have sound instruments, so I always start the day off with training myself to how I want to feel, which is calm. So I burn certain resins in the morning. I have certain sounds on, so I'm already setting the tone. I try to stay in that in between awake and sleep state for as long as possible, because sometimes that's when information will come through. Because think about when you're out in the world and you're in busy traffic and everything, that's not the time to try to be receiving messages. So I try to stay in that state in the morning as long as possible, calming, drinking certain tea, right? Then I minimize distractions. You guys know, I don't know if you've noticed, I don't interact with nobody on social media. And I'm the most social person in a way, like in person, right? Like I love intimacy. I love being people. I don't respond. I don't go through and like everybody's comment. I don't go through and respond to everybody. I minimize distractions. I cannot take in, right? I cannot take in all that information into my nervous system. I cannot. Right? So that's a personal choice. I actually have everybody on Twitter that I follow muted, except for like 2 people. So that means I don't actually see, when I go on Twitter, I don't see anything except my own tweets. When I want to, when I feel ready to take in more information, then I go on. I also take breaks from social media. For, you guys know, I'll take like a month off for Mercury retrograde. I minimize conversations that are draining and distracting. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's a whole lifestyle. I know when I listen to my body, when my body says, you know, do I have the bandwidth for this activity? Do I have the bandwidth for this conversation? I'm constantly checking in with myself, putting myself first, seeing how much energy I have, seeing what my reserve is, seeing what's going to feed me of the day. And then you guys also may know my life's all about self-care. I'm in self-care throughout the week all the time. I'm seeing my acupuncture, I'm seeing my chiropractor, I'm in the deprivation tank, I'm getting light treatments, I'm in the sun, I'm hiking, I am in my women's medicine circle, I'm at sound healing, so my whole life is in that mode of relaxation and wellness, doing things that are not overstimulated. Yeah. Do I have to go in the matrix sometimes? Do I have to run an errand, go to the bank? Yes, absolutely. But I minimize my time in the matrix. That's my lifestyle. Granted, I work from home, but I do also travel at least once a month for work and retreats and things like that. So I do go into busier cities. I also live in the hills in a very quiet neighborhood in the Bay where I don't hear traffic, I don't hear helicopters. I have a view to watch the sunset and a view of the water. I am around water a lot. I mean, it's just, that's the lifestyle of being a sensitive. I can't live in a busy city. So didn't do it overnight, right? I didn't do it all overnight. It took years, but I knew that it was very important for me to live this lifestyle. And I'm happier than I ever been. So it's all been worth it. Okay, let's see what else. What are some suggestions to help support me in shortening the processing time and integrating myself as a higher vibrational match for things that I desire? This question is very confusing for me. Okay, what I think I'm hearing from this question, shortening the processing time, integrating myself as opposed to spending hours to realign myself. Okay, if you already are waiting until you're overstimulated to do something, you're already in trouble. You have to set the tone ahead of time. That means you have to set the tone at night before you go to sleep. I also fall asleep, so I didn't mention the sleep part because sleep leads into the morning part. I am not on my phone after a certain time at night. I don't have technology near me. I have a very calming, like I'm about to get a water fountain installed in my room. I'm not joking around. I want to hear running water all the time. I have fountains outside, but I'm like, oh, I want to hear that sound of like water running all the time. That's what I like. That's what's calming for me. That's what my nervous system wants. Do I think it's overindulgent? Nope, not one bit. Because again, if my nervous system is not highly tuned and functioning, nothing else is going to matter. I'm not going to be able to help anybody. Right? So in my room, completely surrounded by plants, and I'm getting ready to get a fountain that I can hear water running all the time. Smells calm. I don't have any technology stuff in my room, and then in my office, I don't know if you've seen pictures online a little bit, I have a nap area in my office. So one of my quotes is always that my definition of success is being able to take spontaneous naps when I need to. When my body says it's time for a nap, I take a nap. It's right there in my office. There's a little tea lounge nap area in my office, right? And it's surrounded by plants. So that's the thing. You can't wait until you're already overstimulated to try to do something. You have to get out ahead of it. You have to set the tone for calm all the time, especially if you know you're getting ready to go into an environment. Oh, you got to get rid of the guilt of me time. That just has to go. It's not serving you. Guilt in general is not serving you. So guilt about me time is not serving you at all. So that would just reprogram that today. So that means that so to answer your question, Persephone, when you have a moment where you get off. Like I had a moment yesterday. Let's see, in the morning. Was it yesterday? I don't even know. It was yesterday or 2 days ago. I had a moment, moment where I went unconscious. I fell asleep, and I was like, oh my God, like I have I have a lot more people now that are requesting me to do workshops and teach retreats and lead things. And because I was sick this week, I was just like, oh my God, and this and that and this, and I just went into like overstimulation mode. And my partner was like, you don't have to respond to any of those emails right now. And then I was like, oh my God, what just happened? Like I totally felt it. Like I was like, oh, I just had an episode, right? And it's okay. And then I was like, I feel totally calm now. Like I don't even have to respond to those emails until I want to, right? So the processing time of that is going to be faster because I've already created the momentum of my normal way of being, so that when that happens, I know that's the not normal thing. I hope that makes sense. So again, what's normal is feeling calm, so much so that when I have a moment of feeling stress like that, it stands out that I was like, that's not even me. That's not even how I approach things. So what does your nervous system specialist do with you? I will talk more in depth about that when we do it, but it's a type of chiropractic treatment and energy work called network care. It's a type of entrainment. So we work on entraining my energy to move through my spine and through my body in a certain way. So oftentimes she'll say, how do you want to feel? And I'll say, I want to feel like I have an abundance of energy, right? For example, that was last week's treatment. So she'll help me to entrain that in my body and all of that. So you can look for people who do that type of work in your area. And you can look up network spinal analysis or network care. It's different names for it. Let's see. Do you have an auric shielding process you can describe for in the moment, like a crowded place such as a concert? Again, I do not wait for something in the moment. I would, if I knew that I was going into a crowded place, I do I think it's called pre-paving. I think it's the name of it. I don't know, all these names have names for things. I do a creative visualization of how I want something to go. Whether it's a meeting, a trip, let's say tomorrow I have to fly and I don't feel good. I've already been positively affirming and envisioning how I want my flight to go, because I can't leave it to my mind to tell me how it's going to go. My mind's going to come up with crazy stuff. So I have to tell the universe and I had to tell my mind what I wanted to do, what I wanted to think. So if I was going into something that I knew was that, I would paint the picture of what I wanted. And I would say like, oh my God, it's going to be so fun. And I'm going to have like so many amazing experiences and this. And I would just start to use creative visualization to pre-pave what I want the experience to be like. I do a shielding process sometimes, and I do a visualization. I do a visualization where I visualize light around my body in a certain way, throughout my body, radiating out. I want to say, I know that it's in one of my guided meditations on SoundCloud, but we can definitely do it next class. If you all think that it's something you want me to do, I'll go through and do my sort of like, my way that I do the meditation for that. There's also a really great auric shield spray in Resonance Apothecary. Oh, yarrow. Okay, yarrow's like, hello. In the auric shield and spray, yarrow is one of the main ingredients, Yarrow is a game changer for highly sensitives. Not only as the oil, but you can also carry, if you know what yarrow looks like, or you know where some is, you can carry it with you. Also the flower essence. It's great for EMF, so like if you're going to be somewhere where you know there's going to be a lot of like electromagnetic kind of poisoning, right? Like busy cities, yarrow. So that's the main ingredient that's in the spray that I make. Okay. When you do your 20-minute retreat inward, when you're overstimulated, what are your self-healing practices you do in order to let the energetic chaos go? Meditation. And so for me, meditation is also energy work. So I do energy work. So what that means is I do a body scan. I feel in my body what's out of alignment, and I tune it. And if you don't know how to do internal body work or internal energy work, I would say just start practicing, because we all have the ability to move our own energy in our body. We all have the ability to tune into certain areas, to send loving intention, to send light, and to actually feel the energy in our body shift. We all absolutely have the ability to do that. So if you're feeling tension anywhere, you can, through creative visualization, with your breath, with your intention, actually feel everything start to flow out of your body, start to be released. If I'm totally triggered, I might do some tapping, or I might do some work with, I might ask my body through, I might say like, do I have an emotion I need to release related to this experience that just happened? And I might do muscle testing, which we talked about and I modeled last class. So I might identify if I have if something like really traumatic happened, let's say, so I wouldn't call this trauma, but I had an incident. You guys might have seen the shirt that I posted last week online. It says, "You're an adult and I don't control your emotions." So actually what that came from is that I had an experience with a Lyft driver that basically, when I got in the car, the Lyft driver, when he asked me where I was going, and then when I told him where I was going, he said, "I don't want to take you. The money's not worth it to me." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't want to take you." And I said, "But that's your job." So you're not a cab driver. You don't decide, like once you get the request, that's what you're supposed to do. And he was like, "Well, I don't want to do it." And I said, "You know what's unfortunate? I'm going to pick up my son right now and I'm going to be late." And he was like, "Don't do that." I said, "I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. You need to know that what you're doing is not okay." And I said, "I don't think you should be driving if you don't want to do this." And, he said, "Don't say things to try to trigger me." And I said, "You're an adult and I don't control your emotions." So that was actually from a true life experience where I had with someone where, I could have gotten upset. I could have gotten frustrated. I could have gotten, triggered by that. I could have been like, wow, I'm in a confrontation and da 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 da. But I actually thought it was pretty funny because I was like, this person is obviously going through something that has nothing to do with me. And so I ended up telling the story to people and I was like, I need that on a t-shirt. So I got it printed on a t-shirt and I have that as a t-shirt now. And all that to say, if I would have checked in with my body to be like, wow, do I feel negative emotion around that? Like, do I feel triggered by that? Do I feel something that I need to release? I could have absolutely muscle tested. And the shirt says, "You're an adult and I don't control your emotions." And I said, "Sir, you have the ability to not react. I don't control you." That's what it says. It's basically. So, and it felt very timely because of everything we were talking about, because he was like, "Don't do that." He didn't want to feel the fact that I was letting him know that he was, doing something that was going to negatively impact someone. He was like, don't do that. I said, yeah, I'm doing it. It's happening. Letting you know that I'm going to pick up a child and now I'm going to be late because you decided, instead of canceling me, you decided to pull up, let me get in, and then see where I was going, and then tell me that's not worth the money isn't worth your time. I said, that's not okay, and I'm going to say something. So I could have checked in with my body and said, like, how do I have anything that I need to clear after that? I did feel overstimulated by the exchange and by his energy, and I could have checked in afterwards and said, you know, do I have anything to clear around this? But immediately afterwards, I kind of like was laughing, so I knew that I was good. And then the shirt just became like, now it's a shirt. Now it's a really lived thing that like I can explain, you know, that yeah, just because I have like positive intentions to be in the world in a way, to be love in the world and to be kind with people, doesn't mean I'm not going to encounter all different kinds of energy. And, you know, and to put the ownership on me, don't say things that make me feel like I'm a bad person. I'm not trying to make you feel like you're a bad person. I'm letting you know what you're doing is not okay, right? And to say, don't say things to try to trigger me, you know? So I was like, we are all adults. You have the right to determine how you want to feel about what I'm saying, and I'm not going to not speak my truth. So I said, I'm going to speak my truth. This is my truth, and I'm going to speak it. And you're an adult, and I don't control how you feel. So that was my way of being in my power, and we are given those experiences and those encounters. They are more rare for me, I will say. Generally, even the person that picked me up after that was like, I'm so sorry that happened. I so apologize. You know, and I could have chosen to react in a way where I was feeling not good, right? And instead, it didn't feel heavy to me. It felt lighthearted. But to answer your question, I did need a moment to kind of like turn inward to check in with myself because I was a little overstimulated. I got put out of someone's car, you know, that's supposed to be providing me a service. So that could have felt triggering, but I just checked in with myself, was sitting, waiting for the next car to drive. I actually had someone that I had just had a beautiful interaction with come to me and say, what happened? I just saw you in the car and then you got out. And, you know, I told them what happened. So it was all good, but to answer your question, depending on the degree of which the thing happened that overstimulated me and what I need to release, is how I would determine what the energetic process would be. So, let's see. Oh, wow. Can you talk more about the amount of body work you get per month and what types? Okay, so I see my chiropractor every month, who's the person that I talked about. I get I have a masseuse, this person who does body work that comes on a pretty regular basis to my house. Usually I have her come after I do any kind of traveling. She's like a medical masseuse, so she really knows about the body and the fascia and things like that. And she specializes in people that have like severe chronic pain, like scoliosis, things like that. I also have a person that does reflexology for me that's like kind of right around the corner from my house. So I'll get, you know, maybe on a random evening, I'll get an hour of reflexology. I might also steam at that time or do the sauna. So depending on if I kind of like my joints need a little warming up, I'll do that. I try to see my chiropractor at least twice a month. And my chiropractor does chiropractic work, energy work, and cupping. And I get herbs. So those are my primary things that I do on a regular basis. When I'm really on task, I do Qigong, try to do Qigong every day. And then I do work out. I will also work out, not so often, but I try to work out as often as possible. I do go to the spa. So I usually go to the Korean spa, which has combinations of hot tubs, steams, saunas, baths, and I'll try to do that at least once a month. So yeah, I used to go to the sensory deprivation tank every month, but I stopped doing that. Okay, a lot of these do not relate to this class. How are you able to stop yourself from becoming overstimulated? Again, I entrain myself to be in a state of calm. I entrain myself to do that so that I already have a reserve of ease and calm available for me, so that when I do have life situations where, you know, I'm put out of someone's car, for whatever reason, that I'm not in a fight or flight mode, so I'm not immediately reactive. I'm not triggered. I still feel safe. I still feel like all is well. But it is information for me to work with, to see. You know, so I might get a little like tossed around, but I won't get totally overstimulated. Irene, when you have emotions that seem to come out of nowhere, how do you know whether it is your own unconscious emotions being released or if you're empathing? For me, I don't really have emotions that come out of nowhere anymore, to be honest. Usually, if there's an emotion that comes, it's not out of nowhere. It's extremely related to something that I can tie it to. I just had a conversation. I just went somewhere. I saw something. I just had a certain interaction. So that feeling of like, you know, I'm somewhere, I'm with someone, or I interact with someone, or I remember this is the example that's coming to me. I remember one time I was on public transportation. I also don't take public transportation much anymore. Sorry, guys, that's just me. I'd rather walk. I'd rather walk somewhere than to be on like the busy train. And I know that's not the option for everyone, but I'd rather ride a bike or walk or, you know, do whatever. But I try to minimize public transportation at this point in my life. If that's an option for you, great. If not, I totally understand. But I remember being on the train, and or if I do, what I'll say is I will absolutely have like solfeggio frequencies on, like some kind of like, you know, Schumann resonance on, some kind of sound frequencies on in my ear if I have to do that with earplugs. Earplugs save my life in music. So kind of like, I might even close my eyes. If I need to do that, I might go into a meditative state. So I'm kind of like, my vessel's there, and I'm not abandoning my vessel, but I'm not really like functioning in that way if I have to do that. I also have a travel pack, and I talk more about that next time. I have a special kit that I travel with of things that I need that I have, so that it's something that I can have with me available anytime. But wait, God, what was the question? Oh, someone said about other people. Oh, so I noticed, I looked over, all of a sudden I saw a person, I knew they were running away from home. It was a younger girl, and I knew she had, I don't know how I knew, but I knew. This is back when I was empathing, and I felt it, and I started crying. And I just knew she was running away from home. You know, so that's the kind of thing where I'd feel like emotions out of nowhere. I don't have that anymore. Cord cutting. So last month we talked about energy exchange 1.0 and 2.0. Maybe you all can help. I talked about cord cutting mostly in which one? You guys can help her out. So she's asking which class was that? Oh, thanks for earthing. I came to class a little late. Do you recommend any other items in your shop for empaths? Higher self-tea. My whole shop is made for sensitives. Everything. But specifically, what I recommend, the nervous system tea is all adaptogen herbs. It has holy basil in it, nettle, oat straw. It has lemon balm. It has ashwagandha. It has catnip. And it has skullcap, passion flower. So it has my favorite adaptogen herbs in it. And there's also the adaptogen tincture, which is just the higher self tea made into a tincture. Someone said I love the open heart blend. That's a great one too. I love the higher self tea because if you ever make your herbs just as a tea, like a fresh tea, and just, let them steep and then take the herbs out. Sometimes, like one of the ingredients in the open heart tea, if you leave the herbs in too long, it can taste bitter. So even though it's medicinal and you're getting the medicinal benefit, sometimes the motherwort, which is such a great herb, by the way, it's literally like a mother's hug. It can taste bitter, but the higher self tea, if you were to make an infusion, so what an infusion is you leave the herbs in, you don't take them out, and you just let the water become more infused. So it's somewhere between just making tea and making a tincture. Just let the herbs stay in. It tastes great. Tastes great. So that, let's see, I'm going to answer maybe 2 more questions. I think this falls under the topic of empathing and boundaries. How do we balance supporting our friends when they're overwhelmed by their emotions when they're overwhelmed by their emotions for us? Okay, I didn't know you were going to go there, Torres. I had a friend open up to me about their feelings for me, but I don't feel the same way. I want to support them, but I also don't want to make things worse. Is there a way to gracefully move forward with them without being enmeshed? Okay, you got me in the labyrinth. Okay, let's see. It might be my last question. How do we balance supporting our friends when they're overwhelmed by their emotions for us? Okay, so this happens very often when you're a healer. I'm going to tell you why. Very often, people think that they're feeling feelings for you that are romantic, but what they're actually feeling is they're feeling their own energy. And they're feeling that when they're with you, they have permission to be who they are. They feel safe. They feel a lot of things that they want to feel, right? They might even feel like Kundalini activations. They might feel awakening. They might feel magical. They might feel all these kinds of things. I've had this happen my whole life where I've had this experience my whole life where people become very obsessive with my energy. And they really think that they're in love with me. They think it's romantic. They think something. And I'm like, no, that's not what's happening here, right? I know that what you're feeling is you're just feeling spirit. You're feeling a connection to your own source, right? And so I've had to learn how to let people know it's actually not about me at all. And I talked about this online the other day, and I talked about love bombing. I think I talked about this in Healthy Boundaries class, Love Addiction, maybe, about love bombing, where people, they are like, oh my God, you're so amazing, you're this and you're that, and then they use that as a way to try to manipulate you to get more of you, right? And then if you don't reciprocate, then they're like, well, you rejected me. It's a very subtle way of energy manipulation. right? And it's a very, like, I've had people that will like write me an email every week and be like, oh my God, you're so amazing. I love you. This, like, and it'll be someone from online. I don't know who this person is. They've decided that I'm their spiritual mommy or something, and it's very obsessive energy. It's like, it's very like, oh my God, this, and you showed me this, and you showed me that, and you da 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 da, right? And then I don't want to reject them, but I'm also like, this isn't about me. This is not about me at all. And then what happens is, because I don't reciprocate, and then they feel rejected, then I'm blocked online. This happens to me so many times, you guys. Okay? And again, it's just a phenomenon that I understand that is not about me. It's about projections. And it's oftentimes the main people who are very obsessive with me, right? Kind of borderline stalkerish a little bit, that then the adverse effect of that is that they blocked me. I'm like, I've never even interacted with you, right? And again, this has to do with people's trauma. It has nothing to do with me. But because they see something in me that is in themselves. If I could say something to them, I would say, whatever you think you see me, it's in you. You don't need my validation. You don't need my appreciation. You don't actually, and I didn't sign up for that. I'm not available for that, right? So when people have those kind of feelings towards you, and it's their own fantasy, it's a fantasy thing that they've created. They put you in a role of like, if this person can see me, then I must be valuable. I am not available to play in that way. I'm not available. So that's the thing. It's you can have compassion, but actually it's an unhealthy, it's a dysfunctional cycle that people are in, and I'm not available for it, you know. And so when it comes to the some people romanticize it. They're like, I have people write me emails and tell me that we're twin flames, and I don't even know who this person is. I think you're my twin flame, and such and such and such and such, you know. And again, it's like, that's the nature of this time of people seeking, and they see certain things in you that they want to embody. They see something of you that is of themselves. They see your connection to spirit or source, and they feel when you're around you, they feel it stronger, right? But you guys know, I'm nobody's guru. And none of that. So I actually, I have very clear boundaries with that kind of thing. I have very, very clear boundaries, because if you're really meeting me, you're meeting me as an equal. And nobody that knows me could ever say that I've ever put myself above anyone, you know? So that's the thing. It's when it's projected and all of that, it actually really needs, I think it really needs clear boundaries. It really needs, you continually say, I'm not available for this. Here's what I'm available for. And I would state what I'm available for. That would be the boundary. I would say, listen, I'm available for, you know, kindness. I'm available, whatever it is. I don't know what you're available for. You say this person is a friend. I don't use friend terminology loosely, right? And that's something I learned. If you're an actual friend, not an acquaintance, then I'm going to hold space for you. But if you're like an associate, I don't have a lot of bandwidth for that kind of stuff. So I would, and I know rejection is a big thing. I actually think rejection is very healthy for people, because it teaches people discernment. It teaches people to say, that was a projection. I was living in a fantasy, and I was trying to put you in a role in my fantasy. And now I'm awake. Now I see what I was doing. And now I can approach you in more truth. So that's what I would do. So yeah, I think that's it. Last question I'll answer is, are you taking on one-on-one clients? I am not. I have not done that work in over a year. And that is why I continually bring other guests on, for you all to be able to find other people that can support you if you feel like you need more time than this. I do encourage you to come to the community meetings. It's usually about 12 people, and I do bring people on camera if you are a member of our community. The community meetings are super intimate, and so it's almost like it's kind of like a one-on-one, you know, if it's a smaller group of people. So I do encourage you to come to that if you like. I am working still on my retreats, and I'm working on my retreat center in North Africa, you all know. So currently one-on-ones is not something that I am available, but I do absolutely hope to be doing them at the retreat center. I do hope to be doing hypnotherapy, and I do hope to be doing like other types of energy healing and clearing and things like that. So thank you all so much. How do we know the dates and times of the community meeting? Check the forum. I always post in the forum to ask you all what days work for you. It's usually towards the end of the month, but I'll try to do better to check in my schedule and make that happen faster. So much blessings to you all. I love this topic. I apologize if my energy is a little low today, but I'm still getting over this cough. So thank you all for your love and your support. And I love this topic, and I will see all of you so soon. Have a beautiful Sunday. Peace. Namaste.